Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning, and welcome into the Junk Be Gone studios for today's episode of the Sports Source. We appreciate you joining us. It's a wrap on the orange and white game today. We got a big crowd here. Most shows bring you 3 or 4 people. We like to bring you 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I like these shows where we got a bunch of people on here. It makes it feel like a party in the room. So we'll be breaking down the orange and white game from a whole lot of different angles, different perspectives. We've also got some other things to cover as well in UT Sports. We'll wait and tell you about that in a minute. Let's just get into this show since we got so much to talk about. First segment is brought to you by our friends at the Garza Law Firm. I was watching an NBA game this week, and an ad popped up for an attorney I'd never heard of. And when I looked him up online, I found that his main office isn't actually in Knoxville, or in the state of Tennessee for that matter. Marcos Garza and the Garza Law Firm, they are in East Tennessee. Their offices are in Knoxville. They have another office in Jacksboro. And all over East Tennessee, if you need legal help, legal advice, legal expertise, go local, call Marcos Garza and the Garza Law Firm. A long track record of success here in East Tennessee. GarzaLaw.com. All right, let's welcome in the first wave of panelists. We got 3 more sitting off in the wing, but the first go around will be longtime radio host Jimmy Himes. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, John.
Right over here from 99.1 The Sports Animal. You know, it never dawned on me until a couple of months after saying The Sports Animal. You guys are doing the Ohio State thing. What are you doing? You got to change that.
Well, they do what we did.
Okay, they copied you.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Ohio State.
Yeah, The Sports Animal. Josh, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.
Josh Ward. And right there, Chuck Cavaleris, longtime sports writer and longtime media member here on this panel. Chuck, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Nothing against the other sports on Tennessee's campus, but as you saw yesterday, football is king. Let's take a look. UT, these are a couple of photos that they put out on their official Twitter feed yesterday. That's a heck of a crowd. 58,473 people turned out to watch a very quick scrimmage, and they paid $5 a pop to do it. So many turned out that there were some complaints, in fact, and we got some highlights that we're just going to roll, a little bit of wallpaper to set the table for you if you didn't get a chance to get over there yesterday. There were actually some complaints yesterday that they had roped off sections and people went over there with family. Supposedly some recruits' families were like, hey, how come we can't sit over there together? How come we can't sit in these cushion seats? Good problem to have. If you're going to have complaints, you got complaints over the fact that there's nowhere to sit for your spring game. 6th largest crowd in UT's spring game history. Suffice to say, Josh, fan base is fired up for football again.
Yeah, it's carried over from the fall. And the season that Tennessee had and the success that individual players have had and just the state of the program has fans excited about what is happening. And there's the attraction of the quarterbacks, which we're going to get to. That is, I think, a big deal here for fans to come out. Weather was great as well, but the setup overall felt like a game day. It felt like while you're there in that parking lot right across from the stadium, that fans were there to watch a game, and it was a scrimmage where you didn't have everybody available. And a lot of fans going knew that there would be a lot of guys sitting down or sitting out. Chuck, they just wanted to be around Tennessee football.
And it was like the fans were there almost 2 hours early. Like that's what a lot of people were telling me. It's like they were expecting the fans to show up, but 2 hours before the gates are open or more.
It's that spring tailgating that everyone's famous for.
I mean, and the thing I was happy about is that the new players at Tennessee, this gave them a chance to have a taste of what it's going to be like and kind of fire them up to get up for the next segment of their career at Tennessee.
You had some recruits on campus yesterday too, football and basketball, and that had to help that you've got that kind of a crowd and that kind of turnout, that kind of energy inside a stadium for a spring game. Jimmy, you were over there.
Yeah, they made it a festival is what they did. The Ball Village, they had a bunch of stuff going on. They had people tailgating all over the place. I couldn't get into G10, it was full. I couldn't get into G3, that parking lot was full. Like, y'all go home. I need a place to park here. But there was
world of no longer full-time sports media.
I'm retired. Yeah. I thought it was a great turnout. And remember, they had about 25 or 30,000 seats in the south end zone that were roped off for construction.
Yeah.
So it was actually easier to count the crowd a little bit in watching it, and I don't argue with that crowd at all at 58,000. I thought that was pretty accurate. But to see that many people show up,
Yeah.
and I think it's kind of what Josh was saying, it's a combination of the appreciation of what your team did a year ago. Take a look at the quarterbacks. Take a look at some of these new guys you've been hearing about, of the 18 or so newcomers that came in at midterm. I think a lot of that played into it.
And a great day for weather, too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right,
that,
it was.
that helped as well, obviously.
Especially compared to today.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Danny White and the job they continue to do in terms of they get it, that it's entertainment now, and you've got to compete for the entertainment dollar, and you've got to make it a show in every way possible. And they do. I think he does a great job of that. It was hard to take a lot from it, though, and I always say that of a spring game, but yesterday's especially, your top two running backs were out, your top four receivers were out, several defensive players were out, walk-ons were on the field early and often, and the focus seemed to be all on the short passing game. Well, not all, but for the most part, short passing game. It didn't look like your normal offense. Joey Halsley, his first day calling the plays, so he got a little bit of experience there. But the talk going in, and you mentioned this, Josh, was Nico Iamaleava and his debut. We'll talk about all the quarterbacks as we go, but hey, look, he's the five-star freshman, $8 million NIL deal, whether anybody admits it or not. Nobody denies it. Your thoughts on the way he looked?
Yeah, and by the way, it was a big crowd. You could hear the roar of the crowd when Nico went out there to take his first snap because fans were excited about seeing what he could do. He made a throw to Ethan Davis that I think showed what his ability is, why he's rated where he is coming in as a quarterback. So his performance, I'm not going to make much of it, but when you watch how he plays, you watch him move, and that's something Josh Heupel talked about after the game. His mobility, his ability to throw on the run. During the recruiting process, we talked about he kind of looks like he's made to run Josh Heupel's system, and there were a few plays, the way he ran them, that would back that up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one time when he was able to get out to the right, out to the outside on the right, throw it down the sideline, was that the one to Caleb Webb?
Yeah, that's to Davis, and that often can be a throw it away play, and instead he was able to throw it in there to Davis, who made a great catch too.
Right. So, I mean, he looks like obviously there's a lot to develop there, but for his debut, I mean, you got to be encouraged, don't you?
Oh, I would be. I mean, there was a lot of talk. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There were like two camps on him coming out. And one, he's clearly the number one player in this class. And then there was the other side, which was, he's very raw. It could be a year or two in the system before he's ready to go. I didn't think he looked so raw that he's a year or two away. What I thought is he looks like he needs more time at the dinner table. I mean, I remember Tony Robinson over there. He makes Tony Robinson look like Joe Milton. That's how skinny he looks to me. Maybe that's just me, but he looks like he could be snapped in half. I was impressed with the athleticism. Yeah. I thought he didn't look cowed by the moment at all either. Coming out there, the crowd, he looked like, I've been here for years. But I worry about his size a little bit.
Well, I can't wait to see him next year after he's gained 80 pounds.
Right, yes.
No, his mobility was really good. That stood out to me.
Right.
I thought his downfield vision was pretty good, too, in watching him. So there were a lot of things to like about him. 8 of 16 doesn't knock you away, but he had a couple of passes dropped, and it is early. So, and also they didn't have their 4 top wide receivers out there. That I think that factored in. But I thought there was enough to see out of Nico to think this guy's got some skills.
And, John, kind of like you mentioned, it appeared to be a very limited playbook, didn't it? Yeah. I mean, as many running plays as you had, you're going to run at this play, you're going to do this. To only have a few opportunities to really show off, I thought he did well.
I thought he looked, and again, they had the quick whistle, so nobody was really getting hit. And that's always kind of tough to judge because the quarterbacks in that gray jersey, they also know they're not going to get hit. Yeah. But I thought, and no knock on Milton here, I'm not saying there should be a competition on this front, but I thought he looked more fluid inside the pocket, not just getting outside the pocket. But Milton's a big, bulky guy. I've never thought he looks incredibly comfortable when somebody's coming at him. Like Hendon Hooker can step away from it a little bit. Milton's a big old guy. He needs to run over somebody. I thought that saw a little bit more footwork from Nico than I have out of Milton.
Yeah, fluid's probably right, natural in the way that Nico moves. And when you talk about the expectation, the idea of, okay, well, he might be a year or two away, that might be the case in terms of living up to all this hype. Like, he comes in as, On3 ranks him the #1 overall player in the class. He's #2 in the composite, I believe, overall when you take the different groups. So that comes with a different level of expectation. But he looks like he's ahead of what you expect most freshman quarterbacks to be. Most freshmen at quarterback don't belong on the field, especially in the SEC. Right. And they hope that he's not needed on the field, but he might be. And I would say he is more likely to be ready by the fall to play if needed than most freshman quarterbacks are.
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
And also, think about this. Bryce Young couldn't get on the field at Alabama as a freshman, right? Because he couldn't beat out Mac Jones. But a lot of people thought he was. And then he goes on to win the Heisman Trophy. So the point is, don't expect too much out of a freshman right away.
Exactly.
And there are very few exceptions to that. Peyton Manning would be a part of that, but Peyton Manning, the first couple of games, did not get over either. It took a while before he kicked it in gear.
He couldn't claim the job for 2 or 3 weeks.
So I temper expectations about what he might do this year, but I do think the skill level is there for him. It looks like he could be a really good college quarterback.
Agreed. All right. When we come back, well, let me go ahead and show you what we got to come. Joe Milton's day. We're not gonna leave off the guy who's projected to be the starter. We're gonna talk about Joe Milton today. Who popped? Who flopped? I don't know that anybody flopped, but we'll see. The Hoops roster is under a squeeze right now in terms of the timeline. We'll get into that. Would Tennessee sue the NCAA? I keep hearing this. If they don't like what they get from the NCAA at their hearing, they'll sue them. I don't know about that. We'll discuss that. But when we come back on the Sports Source, we got 2 more VFLs joining us, 1 more media member. We're going to get all their takes on Nico, and then we're going to get all their takes on the rest of the quarterbacks, and on through that list we've talked about. So come on back on the Sports Source.